Yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you. Becomes easier to check the survey scores and other details. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll be conducting 4 activities. So activities is where the participants have to log into Mentimeter. They have to respond to few questions, and finally, whatever theory part we teach, maybe a bit of an activity wherein we give them a context and make the participants say whether it is a plagiarized topic, or the content is plagiarized or not. So that's the way I've designed. First, we'll cover the theory part of it, and then a little bit of practice. It's okay, Noel?
Vidya, it reached 50. Now we can start.
Okay. So, a very good afternoon, and all the various entities start the next session of development program. The topic in social science. Today, this session will Rishikesh Thomas, Christ, D. Invite Raki Assistant College. Welcome.
Raki, you may proceed.
Good evening, one and all. I welcome all of you to the afternoon session of our faculty development program. And I would like to give a special welcome to Mr. Rishikesh sir, our resource person, assistant professor in Christ University, Bangalore. Welcome, sir. He worked earlier with SRCC, Providence Women's College, FIMS, and also a senior research publication associate at IIM Kozhikode, and presented papers at national and international level. And he invited as a resource person at various FDPs and academic workshops, and a life member at professional bodies like All India Commerce Association, All India Management Association, and several other. And he's an academic advisor too. Once again, I welcome Mr. Rishikesh sir to have the session on the topic plagiarism. Thank you, sir.
Is it good to begin, ma'am?
Yes, sir. We can start.
Yeah. I'll start sharing my screen now. So let me begin with a cliched statement, or rather what we have been saying all this during the pandemic times in our online classes. Am I audible? Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir, both are.
All right, thank you. So thank you very much, Department of Commerce, Providence Women's College, from where I began my career. I mean, it was long back, but thank you for remembering me and calling us back, if not in live campus, but in the virtual campus. Thank you for this opportunity at first. And I really thank and appreciate the confidence that you've reposed in me, and also in giving me this platform to share and exchange some of my ideas, some of my views, some of my observations, some of my apprehensions, some of my concerns, which I have acquired over a period of time, probably in the past roughly around 14 years of my teaching experience. Having said all of that, I thought I'll begin with an observation made by Mark Twain. If you tell the truth, you don't have to remember anything. And I think this statement is true in multiple contexts. This is true with our life as much as it is true with research. If you're telling the truth, you can live every moment without fear of getting caught. If you're writing the truth, you can live without the question of the plagiarism being raised or being pointed at you. So that's a broader premise on which I would build this little conversation for roughly about 1.5 hours, and then we'll take up a few questions. And meantime, there'll be a few activities in which I request all the participants to involve yourself, engage, because I don't want to make this a sort of monologue, only one-sided. You can certainly point out my mistakes, because I must confess, rather I must say that I'm not an expert in this topic. I only have an interest in this topic. And ever since this opportunity was given, I was trying to cross-connect with my own research experience, both doing PhD as also while helping students do their thesis, or probably helping or mentoring our research students. So some of which might, I'm sure you would certainly empathize with whatever examples I'll be quoting. But then, as I said, you can certainly point out my mistakes if I'm going wrong, if there is any factual error. But then one request is to reserve all your questions towards the end, because this is a common thing which I always say in most of my online discussion, because sometimes what happens is some of your questions during the course of our presentation or during the course of our discussion itself gets answered. So it's better, I mean, just a suggestion, it's not a rule of thumb, but it's a suggestion that you reserve all your questions. As in the introduction they had said, we'll have certainly about half an hour, 20 minutes to 30 minutes to clarify, ask questions, and have a discussion. So that's a request. Now, I'm sure those of you who have taught organizational behavior, or some of you have done B.Ed, or some of you have read about experiential learning, would have come across Kolb's experiential learning cycle. Now, what we are doing today resembles or resonates with the idea of experiential learning. Almost all the participants who are attending this faculty development program come with a wealth of experience. I'm told that majority of the participants are teachers and researchers. Most of you have PhDs. So the collective wisdom of all of you, I'm sure, would be much more than the little ideas that I'll be sharing with you in the next 1.5 hours. So that's the reason why I said, if there are any areas which you think you can contribute, feel free to do so. If you want to point out any factual errors, please do that. Yeah, because this is our platform. This is not my platform. We'll collectively, churn out something meaningful. We'll collectively try to create some value at the end of this faculty development program. So the first point is all of you come with concrete experience. The second aspect of the CLOBE's experiential learning, or why we all do take part, either as participants or as resource persons, is to do a reflective observation. And that is exactly what we are doing, or that is exactly what we are meant to do in a faculty development program. We'll sit and think about, or we'll sit and reflect about what is it that we are doing and what is it that we are not doing. Or we'll think about what is it that we're doing correctly and what are the areas of improvement, right? So as I said, we come with a lot of experience and we are here to do some sort of a reflective observation. And in the course of our discussion, certain concepts, abstract conceptualization is what it happens. Certain concepts do evolve, certain clarity certainly do evolve. Sometimes some of the thoughts that we share might trigger newer thoughts to explore the topic on your own. Yeah, not everything might get covered in this discussion given the time that we have, but then we intend to conceptualize certain ideas. That's the third phase of this faculty development program. And the last phase is we intend to go back to our classrooms. We intend to go back to our academic institution, to our colleges or universities, and do an experimentation, active experimentation. And we complete this cycle and it doesn't get over. It's like a vicious cycle. Probably after this season, you would attend another FDP, or you would attend another seminar or a conference. From there, you continue this process. But then, as I said, this is a platform where there should be a give and take. So please do involve yourself. Please do make it experiential learning, a platform wherein I would also at the end of the discussion learn something from you, because I don't want to place myself at a higher pedestal and preach big things, because as I said, I don't have an expertise. I only have an interest in this topic. Now, having said all of this, let me take some time to create a context. I'll be taking about roughly about 15 minutes to set a context to the topic that we have taken up for discussion. And this is my first attempt in it. Now, what if you got to know? I'll give 3 circumstances. I mean, you got to know is very important, because that's my addition. That's not the addition of Lathrop and Foss, who had suggested this context. I've given credit to the authors. That is exactly how we avoid plagiarism, the topic that we have chosen for discussion today. Lathrop and Foss has given 3 different contexts. And the first context is, you got to know that the architect had cheated his way through maths class. Will your new home be safe? Right? At a later point, you realize, or you got to know that the architect to whom you have assigned the task of designing a building, or probably your house, had actually copied it during his school days, or probably in his in college days. What happens, or what goes at the back of your mind? Yeah. Second context, your lawyer had paid for a copy of the bar examination to study for the examination. will the contract she wrote for you stand up in court? The third context is the accountant who does your taxes hired someone to write his papers and paid a stand-in to take his major test. Does he know enough to complete your tax reforms properly? Just 3 hypothetical situations. What happens is, by and large, you would lose trust in all 3 people. Their credibility is put under question because you got to know. I mean, you got to know is important till the point you are unaware of, or probably you were ignorant of, you believed in them. But then at a point when you got to know that the architect had cheated in his college, or at a point when you got to know that the lawyer had copied for a bar examination, or at a point when you got to know that the accountant had hired somebody else to write the paper, and he had also paid a stand-in to take some of the accountancy examination, what happens is the credibility of that person is lost. And this is exactly what it happens in the case of research. What if your research paper is cheated, or you have copied from somebody else's research which is already published? What if you have paid someone to do the research for you? Or what if you've hired somebody to write the paper? The result is the same, or the kind of perception that you create is the same, right? So that's the broader premise on which I would build this little conversation. It is about building a credible academic profile. How is it that we build a credible research as also an academic profile? Now, because, as Sophocles had said, it's rather fall with honor than succeed with fraud. It's better to fail with honor than succeeding by committing a fraud. So how is it that we could succeed without committing a fraud? I mean, I'm addressing teachers, I'm addressing students, I'm addressing research scholars, unexperienced faculties, or probably the newbies into the field of academics. And as I said, there are experienced people as well. So it's a mixed bag. So I'm not saying all what I've said applies for all, but then this is a broader premise on which we need to set a context discussing about plagiarism. Now, the first point which I wanted to mention is the title, though mentioned in the brochure as plagiarism, I've slightly kind of modified it. It's actually, plagiarism is a kind of a plague. Yeah? And there is an unclear boundary which is set by the research community. And I say this from my own experience. Plagiarism, the criteria of assessing plagiarism varies to institution. It varies to sometimes the research guide. It varies to the journal where you're publishing. It varies to countries. It varies to regulatory bodies. It varies to the institution where you're doing your PhD or where you're doing your research. So the first thing to understand is, what is the definition of plagiarism in the institution or in the as per the journal where you intend to publish? Because the boundaries set are not uniform. There is no, it's like one size doesn't fit all. One definition of plagiarism doesn't fit all. And that's why I sort of modified the title as the unclear boundaries about the plague of plagiarism. Why is it that I call it a plague? I'm sure all of you would agree that plagiarism is extremely common in most of the assignment submissions of our students. The courtesy actually goes to Wikipedia, SlideShare, and so many other online resources of whatever submissions it comes. But what is it that we could do? Is it right? Is it wrong? Should that be encouraged or discouraged? How is it that we can interfere? What creative steps can we take? I mean, these are the kind of discussions also I would kind of initiate in this little conversation. So the kind of broad agenda that I have is, I'll set a premise about what education is. Probably that's the way I look at education. Then I'll talk a bit about what research is and the intention of research. Then talk a bit about publication. And finally, I'll talk about plagiarism. And that's something which will take a lion's share of our discussion. Plagiarism, the rest of it is only for about 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, not more than that. Because that level of understanding is needed for us to sensitize our students to develop a sort of research culture which is ethical at the same time which is credible. Yeah, I thought a little bit of an extensive discussion is needed. Now, having said that, in high school science, most of you would have learned about the two hemispheres of our brain, the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. The left is more rational and the right is more emotional. The left is more mathematical, the calculative in nature. The right is more artistic, intuitive in nature. People who are strong with the left brain are good with maths. And those of you who are good with the right brain are good with literature, music, dance, games, and so many other things, right? And that's how the brain is wired. That's how all our brain is designed. And as these attributes vary, it brings about differences in our personality. It brings about differences in how we perceive things, how we understand things, how we interpret things, or how we educate ourselves. And that's a broader take on how our brain is wired and how our brain is designed. Now, if you look at the curriculums of the institution that all of us have come through, it is designed in a way that it empowers the whole brain. We talk about the holistic development of the brain. It empowers not just one hemisphere, but by and large, if you look at the schools and the undergraduate level, it's mostly about read, remember, recollect, and reproduce. And then for the sake of an examination, it's more about that, the 4 R, read, remember, recollect, and reproduce. But then as we move up the ladder, as we move up the academic ladder, things slightly tend to differ. So I kind of look at it in this manner. In a kindergarten or in a school, what happens is lower order thinking skills. The tutelage or the teaching, the curriculum is designed to probably learn the alphabets, to learn the numbers, to learn calculation, the basics which are needed. Again, remembering and recollecting. And then as and when we go up the academic ladder, we reach a point of higher order thinking skills. And that's a point at which we end up doing research. And it is very well designed. And how is that designed? I mean, this is just my way of looking at things. This is my interpretation of how the academic systems are or how the education is designed. Now, in a school, it's mostly about knowledge acquisition. The application of the knowledge probably is a secondary thing that we look into, right? Let's say at least till 10th grade, it's mostly about knowledge acquisition. Then you take up specialization, could be science, commerce, arts, humanities. And that's a phase at which the knowledge deepening has happened, or it happens, right? acquired general basic knowledge, and then you've understood what your area of interest or expertise is. It could be science, it could be literature, it could be music, whatever. And then knowledge deepening happens. And if you look at the curriculum design in our university where we have undergraduate students, this is a phase at which we ask students to go and do service learning, which is a component of the syllabus. And they have to do service learning, come back and submit a report. They have to be a part of an NGO, work with them for some time and come back with a research report as to what is it that they've learned, what they are applying in that organization which they have interned. I'm talking about internships, right? So that's when the knowledge deepening happens, because you slowly and gradually get into the application part of learning. And finally, when it comes to a university level of rather a master's program and above, it could be MPhil. MPhil is no more there as per the revised UGC guidelines. And then let's talk about PhD and research, is when you start creating knowledge. Now, in my university, the Christ deemed to be University Bangalore, it is mandatory that every postgraduate student, every MCOM student completes a research paper and publishes either in a UGC, Scopus, or ABDC or any other journal. And why is it made mandatory? Because it is at this phase that the knowledge creation happens. The knowledge deepening had already happened at the undergraduate level. And we have to graduate our mind, or probably our students, to a point of higher order thinking skills. If I can re-articulate in a different manner, the lower order thinking skills primarily aims at remembering, and then it is taken to a point of understanding, applying, and then you start analyzing. A kid knows this is 10 rupees and this is 100 rupees. And then you give them 100 rupees, go shopping. They do an analysis and come back, this shop is much cheaper than the other shop. And that's when they start evaluating. And finally, you have to make our students, or rather all of us have to make our students create money for themselves, or value for themselves, knowledge for themselves. And that's when they do an assessment and understand, and this is an organization, if I work, I'll create value, or this is an organization, if I work, I'll create wealth, right? So this is exactly how it happens in research as well, because knowledge creation happens at higher order thinking skills, right? But then, why is it that I'm giving this sort of a context? I spoke about how the brain is wired and is designed, spoke about two hemispheres, the left and the right hemisphere, and it is the differences in which we are wired, why we think differently, we conceive things differently, we understand things differently, interpret things differently, we do research differently, right? And the curriculum is designed right from, let's say, kindergarten to whatever highest form of education you take it, to take from a point of remembering to knowledge creation. Now, having said all of this, it is similar to what Edgar Dale's cone of experience. Again, I'm quoting something from education. Those of you who have done B.Ed or have read about education literature would have certainly come across this. Only 10% of what we read is retained, or people remember only what 10% of what is read. So is the case with hearing, only 20%. If it's watching videos or viewing images, 30% of what they see is what gets retained. I mean, this is a point at which we need to think about how effective is our online teaching and learning. If you go by these literatures, 30% of what they're watching and viewing is only getting remembered or recollected. And I actually do have an experience when we sat for the postgraduate admission process. Majority of the students who had come for admission, they lack communication skills, they lack general awareness, they lack even subject knowledge. I mean, students are scoring well, but the effectiveness of learning in the past 1.5 years is a big question mark. It is, at least that's how I look at it. But then the point I am trying to bring in here is 50% of what they see and hear gets retained. 70% of when we make students collaborate and do things. I mean, that's the reason why we have team presentation or group presentations, group discussions, group activities, or why we have festivals, fests rather, in campus, because that's what helps students to learn from each other. And 90% of what they create is what gets retained. So it's a kind of an epitome of learning. When the students or research scholars create advanced knowledge, they are at a point of becoming self-reliable or self-dependent. Yeah, because that's the point at which the learning becomes most effective. Now, having said all of this, one of the things which all of us should acknowledge and appreciate is, ours is the generation which is the most luckiest in terms of teaching, learning, research, extension, or whatever. At Delhi School of Economics, when I was doing my MPhil, my research guide, Dr. Vanita Tripathi, she used to say, Rishikesh, in my college days when I used to do research, I had to scout to multiple libraries in Delhi. I had to take about 3 months break from my official work. For what? To go to the library and collect academic resources, research articles. And everything was done manually, right? But how fortunate are you? At a click of a button, almost everything is accessible. So there is a fundamental shift in which the research or teaching or learning or whatever we discuss has changed post 6th of August 1991. And what is the importance of 6th of August 1991? It is on this date that internet had become accessible for all of us. Till then, it was used only by the US Army. But then post 6th of August 1991, all of us, I mean, it's a great revolution which had happened from, let's say, local and linear opportunities to global and exponential opportunity. I would have confined only to the place where I reside or where I can go, I can travel and collect information. But today, at the click of a button, you can access the database which are available globally. And that's a humongous opportunity. That's a huge opportunity that's the reason why Vanita ma'am always used to remind me, don't get upset. Even if your research work is not happening, don't get upset, because you are the most blessed generation, because ours were much less privileged than you are. But then internet had also brought in a lot of, the flip side is what I'm trying to say, a lot of other things. Our research today is not just confined to Google or a Google Scholar. There is Gestor, there is ProQuest, there is EBSCO, Encyclopedia, Sage Publishing, Elsevier. I shouldn't have actually mentioned about SkyHub, but then it's common that people do access, even if it's not authorized or not permitted. people do access Sky-Hub and collect information or collect articles, which I know whether it's ethical or unethical is a big question. But then what I'm trying to say is today the accessibility of information is so much. And that's where the question of plagiarism comes. You can't hide, or there is a limit to which you can hide if you're trying to do a plagiarism. Because the knowledge is open access now. Most of it is open access. And how much ever smart you try to kind of manipulate with your data, you will at some point get caught. I mean, that's where you need to think about the first statement I said. If you're telling the truth, you need not remember many things. If you're telling or writing something which is really genuine, you need not be scared about whether I'll get caught or whether my work would get rejected or whether it gets published or not published, because you are thorough with the process of avoiding plagiarism. That's the only way in which we can avoid plagiarism. Learn about how to avoid plagiarism, because the internet has brought in a lot of transparency in the entire academic ecosystem. Not just academic, throughout, I mean, any aspect that you take. In terms of opportunities, in terms of challenges, internet is actually. Now, another small aspect that I wanted to mention. I said I still haven't gotten to the topic. I'm just setting a context, because this context is extremely important for me, at least to cross-connect certain aspects that I'll be discussing in the next part of my presentation. Probably towards the end, you'll be able to cross-connect all of it and make sense. Now, for generations, we have been saying this, Mata, Pita, Guru, Devo, Bhava. I remember a student, Siddharth Kamath. He was selected the best student in campus in, when I say campus, I'm referring to my campus, Christ University. 2015, he was chosen as the best student. And the occasion was Thanksgiving. And he was thanking his parents, Mata, Pita. He was thanking all the faculties, the non-teaching staff who had encouraged him throughout his 3 years of his academic life. He was thanking Almighty. Meantime, he was also thanking SlideShare, Wikipedia, Google, and so many other things which had helped him in his assignment submission. And I think that's the brutal honesty that the student has done. And that is exactly what we need to do to avoid plagiarism. Be brutally honest of what you're doing and what you can avoid doing. Yeah. So I'm slightly modifying this Mata, Pita, Guru, Deva. When we have to redefine, theories, we have to redefine as per the newer edition. The millennial edition is Mata, Pita, Guru, Google, Deva, Bhava. Imagine a day without Google. Can you imagine? You can't. Imagine your research without Google. So what I'm trying to emphasize on, or what I'm trying to bring in, is the internet ecosystem has brought in a lot of transparency in the academic circle. No matter how smart, how shrewd you are in hiding the source from where you've lifted the data for your research, at some point or the other, it will get caught. So how is it that we can avoid such a probability is what I'll be discussing hereafter. So that was probably I took about, I said 15 minutes, I took about 30 minutes to set a context. Now, having said that context, just a quick revision. I spoke about education, the lots and hots, lower order thinking skills and higher order thinking skills, and the importance of research in knowledge creation. And then I spoke about how internet has transformed and has brought in transparency and opportunities, and how blessed all of us are in terms of the opportunity that we have in pursuing this profession of teaching, is also carrying out our research. Now, the topic that we've chosen is plagiarism. William Ralph had made a brilliant statement: originality is undetected plagiarism. I mean, this has got multiple layers of interpretations to it. Originality is undetected play till a point when you're not getting caught. I had began this conversation stating 3 different contexts. What if you got to know that the architect had done, some faulty things? I mean, till a point you get caught, you're always in the fear of getting caught. So it is always important that the work that we do is genuine and original. I mean, that's actually the way in which I would interpret this definition: originality is undetected plagiarism. Now, there are 2 ways in which you can look at the concept of plagiarism, and there is a good news as much as there is a bad news. I remember a context from the book The Corporate Chanakya, which is written by Radhakrishnan Pillai. It's a brilliant book. If you are interested reading about strategy, it's a beautiful narrative. In that, he gives a sort of a context, and the context is like this. A group of people, a bike expedition group, goes on a voyage, and one day the team leader of this expedition group makes an announcement. The announcement is that you have a good news and you also have a bad news. The good news is that we have traveled more than what we had initially planned for. This was the destination which we had in mind, but we have crossed it long back. We've crossed more distance than what we had initially planned for. And the bad news is that we are lost. We don't know where we are now. This is exactly what it happens in research. The good news is that we have a lot of things that we can explore online and offline, of course. But the bad news is that there is also a possibility of getting caught. It's therefore a double-edged sword. I mean, using all of these open access and online resources has to be done carefully. And what is the care and caution that you need to, be taking while you do your research is what I'll try to explain. Now, what exactly is the bad news, and why is it that we need to sensitize this bad news among the research community to create a credible research culture in our institution? There was a time in our university where a lot of assignments used to come from Wikipedia and SlideShare. But at a point when we decided that plagiarism check would be done, believe me, we started getting genuine research. We started getting genuine assignments, which are written, reflected, and articulated by their own. I did a small experiment. What happens in the assignment submission? When you assume you have given an assignment to the students certainly would resort to all the online, possibilities. Sometimes the same assignment is submitted by somebody else as well. I mean, that also do happen. But will the students get to see each other's submission? No, it is only the faculty who would get to see. So we did this experiment. We created a blog. We give students a topic and ask the students to submit their assignments in this blog. And believe me, in this case also, we got the best of the assignments. Why? Because they got to know what each others are submitting. They got to know that if I submit a plagiarized report, which is like 20% was the plagiarism limit that we had kept, it will get rejected. And it was also connected with the marks. So we need to kind of devise strategies to sensitize our student community to build a research culture which is devoid of plagiarism. And that's where I wish to talk about the bad news of plagiarism. In most of the universities abroad, when our students go, for them it is like a culture shock. None of the assignments that the students submit gets accepted because it's kind of, they can't do, I mean, things have changed at least in our university. The possible consequences of plagiarism is failing grade on the paper, failing grade on the course, loss of a student visa. In certain extreme cases, your credibility is lost. In certain journals, if your plagiarism limit exceeds, the entire academic community is informed and you can't send your article to those many journals. Your credibility is lost once and forever. Yeah. So we need to build an ecosystem which is devoid of plagiarism, for which I think right from the college and the university level, we need to start making attempts, and not just in our PhD or research. That's the first point which I want to do. But what is the good news? The good news is that plagiarism is actually avoidable. It is avoidable if you understand what plagiarism is. It is not rocket science. It is simple logic, rationality in our presentation. The way in which we articulate is what would avoid plagiarism. In which what is most important is the second point which I've mentioned: understand what is citation. Understand what is plagiarism. Second, understand what citation is. And the third is, look at your writing as an outsider, how an outsider would read your research paper. Time and again, if you're doing it, plagiarism can be avoided. Look at your writing like your reader does. Look at your paper just as a layman or a stranger, someone who doesn't have any acquaintance with you would read it and interpret it. What interpretation would that paper give? Yeah, so that's the good and the bad news. So the point here is we need to build a culture of avoiding plagiarism. Second, the good aspect of it is that if we sensitize and understand what plagiarism, especially what citation is, and if we can keep a distance and look at ourselves and do a self-appraisal of what work we are doing, I think we can avoid plagiarism. And how is it, what is the process of doing such plagiarism? Self-check is what I'll try to define. I think I took almost 45 minutes to set again a context. So this is what the scheme of my discussion is. What is plagiarism? Why is plagiarism a bad thing? What happens to plagiarists? Can you spot plagiarism? If yes, how can it be done? And how can plagiarism be avoided? So this is the agenda, or rather the scheme of our discussion for the rest, probably about 1 hour or more, how much ever time I am allowed or permitted to for this discussion, right? So I've set a context, and I want you to cross-connect every point that I've discussed so far in whatever points I'll be discussing hereafter. Now, how do you define plagiarism? What is your definition of plagiarism? Now, I want you to do a little exercise over here. I hope you're aware about this software called Mentimeter. Yeah. If not, I can sensitize you.
So we're not aware. Could you please let us know what it is?
Okay. you need to log into menti.com, www.menti.com. Use the code 78902007. Log into menti.com, use the code 78902007. It's there displayed on the screen. And try to answer this question. How do you define plagiarism? What, according to you, is plagiarism? As and when you type, your answer will get displayed on the screen so that everyone can see what each other are thinking. And that's the reason why I thought I'll go with this activity. Can you make an attempt? Let's see if this works. Probably we can take about 2 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes. What is your definition of plagiarism? How do you define plagiarism? I repeat, the process is type www.menti.com, use the code displayed in the screen 78902007 and answer your interpretation of what plagiarism is. Can someone make an attempt? Your responses would start reflecting here. And of course, it wouldn't. Yes, wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you. Whosoever. So as it is evident, your name would never get disclosed. So it will certainly remain confidential. You can be bold enough to kind of, I'm not undermining your confidence, but then, if anyone is scared of committing an error, it is okay, absolutely fine. Let's commit errors here in our discussion so that we don't commit errors elsewhere, even if it is wrong. So the first response is stealing others' ideas, words, creativity as your own. That's the simplest of definition. Wonderful. Using others' ideas and conclusions in your research. That is another response which I've got of how you define plagiarism. The act of copying text or ideas from others without giving them credit. Beautiful. I mean, all three definitions I completely agree with, because half my work is done because you already know what the concept is. Now, there is a fourth response, copying others' ideas and using it as your own idea. The fifth response is plagiarism is claiming of others' ideas and works as your own. There is a sixth response, copying others' work without giving credit to them. Beautiful. This exactly is what plagiarism is. Half my work, as I said, okay, I think one more response we've got, copying without referencing. Great. Now, having said all of that, I'll go with a very simple way of presenting, which most of you, in fact, all the 7 responses correspond or probably cross-connect and give a larger picture of what plagiarism is. So the simplest way of defining, or how I look at it, is plagiarism is when you pass off other people's text as your own. Now, when you pass off, you're not giving credit to the person who actually owns that content. Yeah, that's exactly what plagiarism is. And most of you have already defined what plagiarism. Now, I'll give you a certain context, and I'm sure these are self-explanatory. While submitting a paper, you are submitting a paper you didn't write yourself. Is that plagiarism? Probably in the chat box you could respond. I think I have access to the chat box. Yes, I do. Yeah. Okay. Anup says, submitting a paper you didn't write yourself. Is it not plagiarism? Everyone knows that this is cheating. Yeah, this is plagiarism. Now, the second question, or rather the second context, is when you're copying from sources and pretending that you wrote it yourself. You're copying from multiple sources and you pretend that you wrote it yourself. Is that plagiarism? Yes. We all know that this too is cheating, right? So I've given you two contexts. Both is plagiarist work. Third context is using a source and saying it is a different source. You have used one source, but you mention it in the paper that it is a different source. Is that plagiarism? Is that ethical? This is also cheating. Even if it is done by accident, this is also considered as plagiarism. Now, there's one more context. Use author's ideas and words without giving author the due credit. And this is something which is the main source of plagiarism. The main source of plagiarism is when you're adapting or lifting an author's idea or words or sentences or a paragraph without acknowledging them, right? Now, how does researchers engage in plagiarism? I'm not doing more activities because it will consume a lot of time, which will take away a lot of our productive time, which should go for some other, a little more meaningful. But then actually I thought of doing one more Mentimeter exercise here, but then I'll leave it. Now, what are some of the tricks probably I think it's important that we have that activity as well. The second activity which I intend to have is how does researchers engage in plagiarism? Or rather, the question which I wanted you to respond is how researchers engage in plagiarism. What are the ways in which the research scholars or students engage in plagiarism? Again, this is a menti.com activity. Menti.com, www.menti.com. Here the code is different, 21853047. 21853047. Whatever responses you are giving will appear as a word cloud here. Direct use of content. Wonderful. Thank you for that response, whosoever it has done. What are the ways in which researchers or scholars engage in the process of plagiarism? Copying ideas, direct use of content. Are there more thoughts to be shared? Okay, I mean, that's why I said this might consume some time. I'll go with some of my own personal experiences. Probably it corresponds with some of your own research guidance experience, or probably your own research experience. Some of the tricks of plagiarism that the scholars play. Number one, copy text from several sources and paste. This is extremely common. Number two, copy text from several sources and use one or two connecting sentences between two. You have taken 2 or 3 research papers. You take one sentence from one paper, the second sentence from another paper, third from another, and use 1 or 2 sentences in between to connect these. I mean, this I have seen. So you need to have informal conversations with students, probably over a cup of coffee, probably in a we have such spaces in our campus where we could take our students and have informal conversations, and in such conversations they reveal all their so-called trade secrets. Now the third one is change alternate sentences. Take probably a same article, one sentence, skip the second sentence and go with the third sentence, and change alternate sentences, and then present. All of these are cases of plagiarism, right? Now, change a few words in a sentence. You take a paragraph or a sentence and you paraphrase those words, only a couple of words, and make it your own. This is common. Now, change every nth word. I mean, this is and I was surprised listening to students, the kind of strategies that they play around. Every 10th word or every 4th word, every 7th word, they keep changing, and without changing the kind of let's say, interpretation of the sentence. That's another trick that the scholars play. Copy text from sources and reference from source, and the reference from some other source. Text is from one source, and the reference is shown as something else. Somewhere you would find a resemblance, but then this is another trick that the scholars play. Now, copy several citations from other single source. You might have taken a text from one document, but the citations are from some other. I think that's a very shrewd way of playing around. Absolutely unethical way of doing. Now, another way of the students play around is use software in unethical manner. There are spinning. I'll talk about this a little more in detail later. But then steal text from software database, delete citations from copied text, and the last one is the worst: ghost writing. I'm not mentioning the name of the university, but then there are universities where you can get your entire thesis written by a ghostwriter. You just need to pay about 30,000 or probably about 1 lakh to get your thesis written. So these are all instances of plagiarism which actually, once get caught, your entire credibility is lost. Both your personal as also your professional credibility is lost. So I think this level of sensitization is extremely important among the research scholars. Instead of directly talking about what plagiarism is, we need to sensitize the context and give them an understanding of how it is done and how not to do research, right? So having said that, let me get into a little more the intricacies of what plagiarism is. If you look at the literatures of plagiarism, there are 4 broader classifications of it. Number 1 is direct plagiarism. Now, what is direct plagiarism? Word for word transcription of the section of someone else's work without attribution or without quotation marks. The entire paragraph is lifted and replaced in some other document and you claim it as your own, which is called direct plagiarism. Now, the second one is debatable, whether it's permitted or not permitted. To what extent is it permitted? I mean, these are things which we need to discuss a little more. It's about self-plagiarism. Your own thesis is recycled for another paper. I mean, you need to be aware that on 20th of April 2020, University Grants Commission has come up with a circular which talks about self-plagiarism. There is a limit to which you can, for claiming your promotions, the self-plagiarism limit in your research work is restricted now. So I would urge you to go back to the circular issued by Universities UGC on I think 20th of April, if I'm not wrong, if I remember it correctly, 20th of April 2020, they had published a circular or issued a circular on this. Now, what is self-plagiarism? Using portion of one's own previous writing on the same topic in another of their own publication without specifically citing it formally in quotes. See, you've once published a paper and you've got credit for it. Again, you are reclaiming the credit for a work which has already got published. Is it permitted? I mean, it's debatable. It is, as I said, it varies to organizations, it varies to universities, it varies to the journals which you are sending, it varies to the research guides. Some would encourage, some would discourage. But I know people, again, I'm not mentioning the name of this person. Someone had approached me and asked, Rishi, do you have your research data? I can make at least 2 papers out of it. I mean, all what I need is the data. I said, I didn't say anything. I didn't respond to it because I didn't feel it's ethical way of doing. So the point here is self-plagiarism is the second type of plagiarism. The third point is, or the third type of plagiarism is borrowing phrases from source without using quotation marks or finds synonyms for author's language. For certain words, you find synonyms so that your the ethos of your paper doesn't resonate with the existing literature, or the meaning or the interpretation remains the same, only the words and the phrases would be different. A very smart way of, but if you're doing it from multiple sources, it's called Mosaic plagiarism, borrowing phrases from sources without using quotation marks, without giving due credit, changing the words, while retaining the general structure. The last one is not intentional. When someone neglects to cite their sources, or sometimes you misquote their source, or unintentionally paraphrase a source by using similar words which are already existing in another literature, you call it an accidental plagiarism. And it is not done intentionally, it is accidental, right? So, but even that would be considered as plagiarism, is what my point is. Yeah. So broadly speaking, there are 4 different plagiarism. One is direct, you are lifting the entire text. The second one is self-plagiarism. Your own material gets reproduced or recycled as another paper. The third is, I don't know whether it's ethical or unethical, but it's debatable. I'm not saying it is completely unethical because you own that idea, you own rather the idea, but then is it permitted? That's why I said you go back and read this of UGC. The third is mosaic, borrowing multiple phrases from multiple sources, and you make slight changes here and there with the language. And the last is accidental, without knowledge, and you've ignored the basic basic etiquettes of research writing. You have ignored the let's say you have paraphrased, you've not given credit, or misquoted. In all such cases, it would turn out to be an accidental plagiarism. So there is no consensus on self-plagiarism, neither about the limit nor about the acceptance of self-plagiarism. So that's the broader kind of types of plagiarism that we need to understand. Now, having said that, I came across another really interesting way of articulating what different types of plagiarism is. This is from a presentation of Turnitin. Turnitin is one of the software which does plagiarism check, and they have classified plagiarism into 10. And I'll quickly run through this because there are other aspects that needs some more quality time to be devoted, or rather to be discussed. And they have classified plagiarism into 10. The first one, some of the topics might be a little overlapping, some of which might sound as if it is discussed earlier, but then this is how Turnitin has recently, the last one I think was in June 2020, Turnitin had come up with this presentation. Now, they say when submitting another's work word by word, it is clone. When it is Control-C, when a document contains significant portion of the text from a single source without alteration, that's Control-C. Third is change the keywords and phrases, but retain the essence of the paper. That's find and replace. That's the third kind of plagiarism as per Turnitin. The fourth is remix. You're mixing paraphrased material from multiple sources into one document. You're taking materials or content from multiple sources, you paraphrase it, and you make a khichdi out of it. It's a cocktail, or rather a remix of multiple documents. Yeah, that's the remix. Now, the fifth one is recycle. When you're borrowing generously from one's own previous work without citation, I mean, it is okay to lift your own ideas, but what if you're not giving citation to your own work? It comes under plagiarism. So when you're recycling your work without giving due credit to yourself, your own work, it becomes another form of plagiarism. Then comes hybrid, combining certain part is perfectly cited, but certain uncopied passages are done without any citation. It's a hybrid mode. Yeah, some are cited properly while some others aren't. Now, another one is mashup, is mixing copied material with multiple sources. And I think there is an overlap in hybrid and mashup, somewhere it sounds similar. Now, 404 error is citing a non-existent source. I mean, such a citation may not even exist in any literature, but still you cite it as a source from where you've taken the information. I mean, students do, or researchers do play around with these kind of strategies. Another is aggregation, or it's also called the RSS feed. It includes proper citation of sources, but containing almost absolutely no original work. Yeah, you've done citation, but it doesn't contain any original work. That's aggregation. The last one is retweet, including proper citation, but relying too closely on the text original wording or the structure. You're retweeting it, but majority of the document is still retained as it is. And the last one, which is my addition, which is actually not as per Turnitin, that's why I've highlighted in a darker shade, is double submission. Yeah, the same paper is submitted to multiple sources. I know, again, I don't want to disclose the name of this research scholar. For 3 consecutive years, the same data was presented as 3 different papers in an international conference that we host in our university, and we were in the review team. And as and when we read the document, we realize that this is something which we are already familiar with, and then we realize that it's getting recycled. Actually, we were considering that candidate for the post of a lectureship, recommending for the post of lectureship. But then once we realize this is the work, I mean, that's the kind of ripple effect of plagiarism. Even if it is done intentionally or unintentionally, if it gets caught, your entire professional is also, your personal credibility is lost. Yeah. So I think I've given you a gist and have had enough and more discussion about the different types of plagiarism. And I'm not taking much of time in, actually I have a department meeting to attend at 4 o'clock, but then I'll be quickly rushing through. So this part I won't be discussing, and I'll send this document to you for you to understand what each of these 10 different types of plagiarism. They have elaborated it, in the sense, Turnitin has elaborated it with examples as to how is it that all of these types of plagiarism occur in research, right? So I'll skip this portion of my presentation because first of all, it is repetitive in nature. And okay, having said all the different, or having discussed the different types of plagiarism, I would just emphasize on one fact, one aspect, that plagiarism is plagiarism, irrespective of what your intention is, or what the intensity of, or the quantity of data one has lifted, or the information or the content you have lifted, or from which source you have lifted, or how much you were. I mean, in business law, there is a saying, no, ignorantia juris non excusat. Ignorance of law is not an excuse. You can't say that you were not aware of this, because you are expected to be aware of this. That is why I was having a little extensive discussion, because you go back and sensitize your research scholars and also your research students that this is why plagiarism should be avoided. Yeah. So awareness, and whether the material is copyright protected or not, even if it is not, if you've copied or lifted a content from a non-copyrighted content, then also it would be considered, provided you get caught. Yeah, that's of course. Okay, so no matter whether it's mosaic, hybrid, accidental, paraphrasing, duplicate, mix it yourself, or copy paste, no matter what form of plagiarism one does, plagiarism would remain as plagiarism. Now, having discussed about plagiarism, what exactly is plagiarism? It's about plagium is a Latin word which means kidnapping. It is actually an intellectual theft, which is, by now I'm sure you would appreciate the fact that it is a serious scientific misconduct. If someone is engaged in, I think we need to discourage people from doing such plagiarized work. I mean, this is on a lighter note. You've copied all of this from the internet, and the report is a report on plagiarism is copied from the internet. And this is a paradox which I had once come across. I used to teach business ethics, and the business ethics student plagiarizes class presentation on plagiarism, which they download the slides from the internet and they present it as, and the topic is business ethics, the topic is plagiarism, and what they've done is also and I used to quote this as an oxymoron. Okay. Hello. Is there any disturbance? Should I be continuing?
Yes, sir, you can continue.
All right, thank you. Thank you. So that was about what plagiarism is. By now, I think I've given a solid an idea of how to interpret, how to identify plagiarism. But this again on a lighter note, Bilson Misner had said, if you steal from one author, it is plagiarism. If you steal from research, from many, it becomes research. Again, I would look at it on a lighter note, on a slightly different level. What he was trying to articulate or interpret as research writing is all about how well you articulate, how effectively you communicate, for which we need to understand the certain writing, writing styles and etiquettes. And I think that's where I'll be spending the rest of the time. Okay, why do people, again, I wanted a poll to be done because these are important. I thought it'll give me a break, as also I'll get some inputs from you so that I can build on what I have come prepared with. So that's the third activity. You have to do a small survey, be a part of a small survey, and you have to rank this question: why people do plagiarism? Is it because they are ignorant? Is it because out of competition or peer pressure? Is it because of indiscipline in research? Or is it because of the poor research aptitude? Or is it because they're doing it deliberately, absolutely ignoring the basic etiquettes or basic ethics of education? Again, you can respond using menti.com, and you have a code 68 18 75 87, and you can give your responses, because this understanding is also quite important. Or else, I think, meantime, you can give your response. I'll come back to this. I'll go with this part of plagiarism. Why people do plagiarism? One is, of course, people don't know what plagiarism is. And that is where we have to sensitize our research scholars. There is a lot of misconception of, or rather lack of awareness or understanding about the integrity of certain digital ethics. Probably that's an area we can interfere as research guides, or probably as researchers itself. Second is, there is too much of emphasis on grade, which is out of competition to survive. People are panic stricken, and we normally say either you publish or perish. Maybe because of out of that pressure is why people indulge in such things. Another is poor time management, inability to effectively manage their time. When people lack focus, that's another. Poor research skills, ignorance about referencing or citation styles, lack of note-taking or referencing skills, because that's an area which I'll be spending a little more time, because Those are the ways in which we can avoid plagiarism. Then personal values, lack of personal integrity, there's no patience, lack of confidence in one's own abilities, or academic insecurity. Sometimes some people say it is okay if I don't get caught. That's another. Then internet repositories. It's a kind of humongous possibilities, as I said, because of the easy access and availability of reading materials. Also, people indulge. Control C, Control V culture is another thing which makes people peer pressure, absence of academic discipline, sheer lethargy, and deliberately doing the cheating. I know some people find thrill of doing the evil, or buying and selling theses. There's also a culture among certain academic institutions. Okay. Thank you very much. So many people have responded. So this is what your responses. So the first is ignorance. Majority of you have responded to ignorance. People are doing plagiarism because they're not aware of what plagiarism is, right? Second, you think it is out of peer pressure. It is out of competition, right? The third is poor aptitude, lack of discipline. Fourth is deliberately done. And the last one is indiscipline. So I think majority of it goes for the first two, ignorance and competition. I think that's where we need to interfere. And okay, I think it keeps changing as and when more people are responding, but that's fine. Let's move on. Now, let's try to understand certain misconceptions about plagiarism. First misconception: after changing the words, we don't need to cite the source, and it is not plagiarism, which is a fallacy of thought, which is a wrong understanding. Even after changing the words, you have to do the citation. What is citation? I'll talk about that in a little more in detail. So even if you are changing the words, one has to do the citation. The second is, every fact needs to be cited. That's another misconception. No, you need not cite every fact. Not every fact needs to be cited. What needs to be cited and what not? I'll speak about it. Third, plagiarism is when the text is copied as it is from some source. No, you can copy text as it is from a source. The only thing is, how do you copy it and how do you cite it? How do you give a credit to the original source? Yeah, that's the third thing. Now, the fourth is, to avoid plagiarism, only paper sources need to be cited. No, it is not just paper. It should, even if it's a virtual or a digital source, that also needs to get cited. How to cite a digital source, how to cite a paper. There are multiple things that also I'll be discussing. Now, plagiarism, every plagiarism can be detected by plagiarism checker. No, which is again another misconception which most of the research scholars have. Sometimes, even systems, the softwares do have its own loopholes or has its own blemishes. So not everything can be detected using software. Another point is, plagiarism doesn't happen when you copy the ideas from non-copyrighted material. Even, I think I've mentioned it earlier, even if it is not a copyrighted material, you have to give credit to the author or the one who owns that copyright. Plagiarism is always a planned action. No, you've also responded. Sometimes it is out of ignorance. It is out of lack of understanding. Also, plagiarism happened. And the last is, plagiarism and similarity are one and the same. No. There is a fundamental difference in similarity with plagiarism. Plagiarism and similarity are not one and the same. So these are certain misconceptions, and which I'll try to clarify. Now, one point which I wish to repeat here is similarity and plagiarism. Now, similarity index means your text, whatever is written or typed, matches with a text which is already existing. And that is only what similarity shows. Whereas it is like same to same. Yeah, what you've written exists somewhere else. But plagiarism is actually a theft. It is a complete intellectual theft which you've done, which can happen by now. I'm sure you've learned through different ways it can happen. But then what are the penalties for the students? I've already said some people lose scholarship, some are suspended, your integrity is lost. But when it comes to researchers and academicians like us, both for the individual as also the institution which you represent, your entire credibility is lost. In certain cases, people are penalized not to send articles to certain category of journals, and the last is your credibility. It is done, all this plagiarism is done at the cost of a person's profession itself, even it might cost a job. So these are the kind of sensitization we need to create. Now, I believe by now I've set an adequate base to speak about how to avoid plagiarism, for which I've already made the statement, ignorantia juris non excusat. Ignorance of law is not an excuse. If you claim that you weren't aware of, I think it is your fault. It is our responsibility to understand what comes under plagiarism and what does not. To begin with, the first thing we need to understand is the documentation styles, or the different styles in which it varies to different disciplines. Anthropology, they follow AAA. In legal, it is the format is legal. But when it comes to disciplines, I'm assuming most of the researchers or the faculties who've joined this faculty development program are from commerce and management disciplines. So here, for us, what is more important is, there are different styles. One is MLA, the other one is APA, there is Caribbean, AMA, American Medical Association. But for us, what is important is American Psychological Association format of documentation style is what is mostly being accepted in the journals. So what is APA style of formatting is something we'll try to learn a little more in detail. Okay. So it's more of a parenthetical citation. Parenthetical means in square brackets or in brackets, you make a note of, let the reader know, reader know what the original source of your body, of your paper is. What exactly is the source from where you have taken? How is it done? What is the method of presenting APA style of formatting is what we'll try to understand. So the first thing I'll emphasize on is to understand what is the writing style. Majority of management and commerce would follow the American Psychological Association or the APA style of writing. Now, the first thing, or rather the tip, which I would rather recommend or suggest is, whenever you start your research and start writing your research paper, write on your own. Most of the times, what I've seen among some of the research scholars which I've interacted with is, they'll read the abstract, they'll read the research objectives, they'll read the conclusion, copy a few sentences from all of these, and then compile it into an abstract, or compile it, or redraft it, reposition it in their paper. What happens there is, the literature is already there. The sentences are lifted as it is. Instead, one of the suggestions which I have followed, and I think it had worked, is that you read a paper, start writing what you have understood about the paper in your own words. If you begin from there, half your work is done, because there is very less likelihood of similarity there as you are articulating things in your own words. So the first suggestion, before that, I think I spoke about APA format. Second is about read and write the content on your own. That's where you need to begin. Otherwise, it's a double work. You copy from some source, later on you find it as plagiarized work. or there is similarity, and then you have to completely rephrase. Instead, rewrite the content on your own. Now, while writing, the important thing is to maintain a research diary or a research note. And that's something which I'll be spending a little more time on. Because most of us, most of the research scholars, I mean, I've seen this in premier academic institutions, they do practice a research diary or a research note. Now, a research note is primarily intended or it is done to strike a balance between the ideas that you've taken from the sources and your own original ideas. So whatever you make a note in the research diary, you write what is it that, or probably copy or type, what is it that you have written on your own, and what is it that you've lifted or taken from somebody else's sources. Second, take note of the referred sources. You need to mark the page numbers, record the bibliographic information from which journal, which page, the web address for every source, because it becomes easier if you have to rework on that paper. It becomes easier to trace from where you'll find the original. So the research diary is a documentation of your research work. It would act as a blueprint in carrying out your research. Now, how do you do the note taking? I think this is my way of looking at it. I could be right or wrong. You can correct me. First, you need to take a source as a bibliographic information. The name of the author, the year in which it was published, the title of the journal, the page numbers from where you've taken it, the name of the publisher, and whatever other details you need to document. Yeah, because and there is a people misconstrue bibliography with reference. We will discuss about how bibliography is different from reference. Now, bibliographic is about a complete detailed description of the different sources from where you've taken the material. Now, the second point is paraphrase or summarize as you go. I said you have to write the content on your own after reading and understanding, articulated in your own words. Second is paraphrase or summarize as and when you go, as and when you read or understand the paper. That also reduces the possibility. Instead of using paraphrasing software, if you yourself paraphrase or summarize it in your own words, in your own language, it reduces the possibility of, let's say, this. I'll just take a small break. I'm getting an urgent call. I'm so sorry. I'll just attend that and be back. Okay. Yeah. So first is about note taking. Second is about paraphrasing. And this has to be done in your own words. Now, when you paraphrase and summarize, write a P corresponding to what you've paraphrased and write an S, capital S, to what you've summarized. Again, it becomes easy for the researcher or the research scholar to trace what is paraphrased and what is summarized later, if in case you need to cross-verify later on when probably a plagiarism software or somebody else points out a similarity in what you've written. Now, the next is use a Q mark at the beginning and end of a passage, which is copied directly from the text. Suppose you've copied a text directly, and I said it's permitted. You can copy a text directly from a source. The only thing is you need to give a credit to it, right? So if you've copied it, write a Q. These are ways in which a very disciplined and systematic researchers I've seen, or with whom I've interacted with, or with whom I've worked with, do. Now, another thing is use different colored ink for copied ideas. Yeah, what is your own what is somebody else's, you need to copy, probably color coded. I mean, that's a better way of presenting it. Then whether you paraphrase or copy quotations, always keep the citation page information with the text, so that if you decide to rearrange your notes, you have a record of what came from where. Now, I would suggest you to maintain 2 documents. One is your research diary, where you have all these details, what is paraphrased, what is summarized, from where you've copied it as it is, or the copied ideas being colored in using a different color code, and you have a record of it, which can be referred to later. And then remember to write down not just the useful information you discover, but from where you have found it too. I mean, these are some of the small tips which actually works when you start reading, referencing, and then start writing your research paper. That's the first aspect. I spoke about APA style. Then I spoke about how important is your writing and what all would come useful or come handy at the time of research, diary preparation, or taking notes, and using certain code words which helps you identify what is copied and what is paraphrased, what is summarized, what is recorded from which source, right? Now the second is about how do you write the paper. The first aspect is about from what all sources, and how do you color code, how do you decode it later. Yeah, it's mostly for your reference. But then second aspect is about when you start writing the actual paper, or rather, that's how you talk to the reader. How do you talk to the reader? While you talk to the reader, always make it clear which words are authors and which are yours, and how do you do it. And borrowing authors' exact same words and paraphrasing author's information, or any author's information, you need to cite the author. So these are certain writing conventions to be followed. Yeah. So I spoke about, probably gave a bit of a tips about the research guide, the record being maintained. Second is about when you start writing your actual research paper, you need to cite the author and follow certain writing conventions. Now, what exactly is citing? Or what exactly is citation? I've given 3 examples. According to President Joe Biden, the economy would be blah, 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 whatever. He goes on to say, or the second example is Lee in the year 2020 argues that the inflation will. The third example is Army's actions were incomprehensible and reprehensible. And then I quote, cite Adams and Morton in 232. Now, in all these 3 cases, what I have highlighted is what citation is. Yeah, all bold words are examples of citation. Different journals, different disciplines, different professors require different citation styles. Again, the best thing to do is ask the author, ask the journal editor, or shoot a mail, or ask the guide, ask the university what the citation or how the citation has to be made. Because there is no, as I said, one size or one advice doesn't suit all. Yeah, citation is all about giving due credit, and this is how you do it. And one of the document, which or probably a manual, which I would all suggest you to subscribe, is the APA 6th edition publications manual. And a citation, it defines a citation as a notation within your writing that documents for the reader from what source certain information is originated. It can be a book or an article or an online source or a website, anything. So this is another kind of suggestion. The 6th edition of the APA in the fields of business and education, APA is widely accepted. A style of writing citation is mostly used. Yeah. Now, how do you tell the reader, or what are the ways in which you tell the reader? When you're doing a citation, when you're making a reference of a person along with the quotation marks, what does it mean to the reader? If I can get some responses in the chat box, or probably I'll go, because otherwise time is very limited. The passage is someone else's information in that person's exact words. When you're citing in quotation marks, the passage is somebody else's, and you're writing the person's exact same words. Now, the second instance is citation and no quotation marks. The passage is someone else's information expressed in your own words. You have paraphrased it, you have summarized it, right? The third is no citation, no quotation marks. The passage is your own idea or an interpretation expressed in your own words. You've read a concept, you've read an answer. So there are three different ways. Citation plus quotation marks is the passage is somebody else's information presented exactly in their own words. Second, citation with no quotation markers, passage is somebody else's information expressed in your own words. You've paraphrased it, you've summarized it. We'll see what is paraphrasing and summarizing in a couple of minutes. Now, the last is there is absolutely no citation or no quotation marks, and in such a case, it is your own idea or an interpretation which is expressed in your own words. Now, some of the examples of APA citation: in-text paraphrasing. Now, paraphrase citation is used when referring to someone else's writing or ideas translated to your own words. Now, this is as per, as I said, which got published in 2010, the 6th edition of APA. Let's say having writing skills is key to success. Now, Adams 2019 is what the source is. In paraphrase citation, author's last name is written first and then the date of publication. Yeah. So I'll go with more examples later, but then the second is, the first one was in-text paraphrasing. The second is in-text direct quote. A direct quote citation is used when you copy the exact wording from any written source. It can again be from a book, journal, website. It's better that you avoid a lot of such direct citations. Otherwise, what happens is in your entire research paper there will be only quote citation. It looks little awkward. How it happens is you have a double quote. Research demonstrates that the need for students to possess competent communication skill. It is taken by an article of Davis published in 2018, page number 38. But what if your entire research paper, the entire thesis is only in double quotes? It looks slightly awkward. So it's better that you refrain from having large number of direct quotes in your work. But there are occasions in which you need to do direct quotes. What are those? I'll try to discuss. So I'm going with more examples so that it becomes easier and relatable for you. One standard format of APA citation is, so I said to avoid plagiarism, the first and the primary thing to do is to cite the author. And since it is commerce and management, it is about following the APA format. And what is the standard format? First, the author's name, year, month, day, title of the article, subtitle of the article, the title of the periodical or the journal, the volume, the issue number, from which page number to page, let's say 22 to 28, and date of issue. This is a format, a very standard format of citation. Now, what if it's a scholarly journal article? I mean, they would look for a little more detail or a slightly different pattern of presentation. Now, here it's again the second name first, the author's name is given, then the year in which it is published is also given, then the title of the article, the title of the journal, the page numbers, the date of issue or digital objectification number. Now, what is digital object identifier? This happens in, you'll get to see this in most of the front page of the first page of the journal article, where you have the copyright notice. That also needs to be mentioned in the APA citation if it's a scholarly journal, which is like digital object identifier, DOI, also needs to get mentioned in the citation. So I spoke about standard format, which is I'm sure most of you are aware of. If it's a journal article, I think I've elaborated it. I'll mention about 2 or 3 more. What if it's a magazine article? It's not a journal. You've found something relevant for your research from a magazine, which is like, could be the Week or the Today, India Today, or something like that. Now, here, the author's name, the year and the month of the magazine, the title of the paper, pretty much similar. Yeah, the title of the magazine, the page number, the issue number should come prior to that, and then the page numbers. Right? What if it is an online source? You have to place the link. I mean, in the third example I've mentioned here, you have to place the link of that journal at the end instead of the page numbers, right? If you read the third example, 6 sites meet for comprehensive anti-gag initiative conference. It is taken from a magazine article published in 2006, November, and from what source it retrieved, and the source of that article is also mentioned. What if it is a newspaper article? Now here, you need to proceed instead of page number. You have to, page numbers has to be mentioned, because newspapers, what happens is sometimes half the news is in the first page, and then the rest news is probably in the 7th page or in the 8th page. So you need to separate the page numbers with comma instead of a hyphen. So that's where, otherwise, magazines or journals or any other source would have subsequent pages allotted for the same article. But in newspaper, you have to separate the page numbers with a comma. Yeah, that's the difference. What if you're copying only the abstract? That's also doable. That's also possible in research. Now, here again, I think I'll elaborate this, the document of the APA style formatting, and an entire PDF is there, which I'll send across to all the participants for you to read and understand. It's very beautifully articulated. It's just a 4-page document. Yeah. So I've just limited to about 5 or 6 different sources, but there are multiple other sources also from where one might collect the data. Now, is everything to be cited in a paper? There are certain common knowledge which you need not cite in a paper. How do you know it's a common knowledge? Now, Prime Minister is a supreme leader and the first among the equals. It's a common knowledge. Everyone knows it. Or insider trading is illegal. Yeah? These are all common knowledge which need not be cited in a paper. For example, depression is caused by biological factors and psychological and social stress. And it's a common knowledge in the field of psychology. If your research is in psychology, such common knowledge need not be cited. So, as I said, not everything needs to be cited. Common knowledge can be excluded, right? Now, how do you know it is a common knowledge, and how can you not cite common knowledge? What if you've read about 5 different documents, and all those 5 documents have undocumented this information? Or I repeat, you can regard something as common knowledge if you find the same information undocumented in at least 5 credible sources. 5 journals have not mentioned about something which is known for everyone, then I think you can consider it as a common knowledge. But what if you are in doubt? If you're in doubt, it is better you cite the common knowledge is not to be cited. However, if in case you are in doubt, you need to cite, right? Okay. I'll skip about a couple of pages. Now, what about the reference page citation, or if it is in-text citation? I've mentioned it might be slightly repetitive in nature. The format is pretty much the same. The second name, the year, the title of the article, the place, the publisher is what the in-page citation format is. Now, fortunately, we are living in a time when there are a lot of softwares which altogether, I would love to do it some other session. There are reference management, academic writing skills, enhancing online tools like Citation Machine or Mendeley, which is kind of extremely common these days, in helping researchers and scholars to do the citation in a more organized and systematic in a way. I think I've exceeded the time. Then there are few other things which are important, which I'll focus on before we wrap up. One of the things to avoid, probably that's the third tip which I would suggest, is use in-text citation to document using other writers' works. In-text is where, while you write in parentheses, in paragraphs, you the ideas or the illustrations, graphics, everything gets cited in the text itself. Better avoid copy-paste information. Instead, read a paper, read a research paper, understand the paper and articulate or write it in your own words. That itself reduces the chances of plagiarism. Do not copy wording directly from written sources as it is. I think it is self-explanatory. Do not use another person's work as if it was yours. I think those are important. But then what is important are these three aspects: quoting, paraphrasing, and summarizing. Because I spoke about citation and some of the styles of citation and the method of presenting the citation. But then equally important is to understand quotation. When to use quotation? Quotation is when you are using the exact words of an author. But when to use a quotation? Number one, when you want to add power of an author's words to support your argument. Now, I had done a research among the transgenders in Bangalore and their workplace discrimination towards them. And then there were a lot of research, existing literature. But then it was similar, whatever I had found in the course of my research was similar to what is existing. So what I did is, I quoted the existing literature or author's arguments to support my argument. Yeah. So when you want to emphasize on an established fact, quotation of using, or probably when you want to disagree with an author's argument. So something is established already by an author, but your research finding is questioning or countering such an argument, then I think you can use a quotation. Or probably you want to highlight one particular aspect in an entire paragraph. Not the entire paragraph, but probably 2 or 3 words or phrases. Then also I think quotation is important in double quotes. Or you're comparing and contrasting specific points of view with that of an existing literature, then again you need to quote exactly the same words. So quotation is when you're using exact same words of the author, and it can be used either to support your argument or emphasize your argument, disagree with an argument, or to highlight a particular point, or to compare and contrast a specific points of view. That's number one, quotation. And the last, there are examples, but I don't think I have the luxury of going with examples. The next one is about paraphrasing. What exactly is paraphrasing? It is about rephrasing the words of an author, putting his or her thoughts in your own words. As I said, better not to rely on the online paraphrasing softwares. Write things on your own. Words, phrases, sentences, structure it on your own. Quotations, everything in your own words. When you plan to use information on your note cards and wish to avoid plagiarizing, because paraphrasing actually helps in avoiding plagiarism. I'll There are examples, but then I don't think I have that much of a time. There are so many. This again, we got to know during the informal conversation with the students. So many softwares are there: Spinbot, Spinner, Quillbot, to paraphrase the words. But then the risk is that sometimes the data would remain in their database, and what if that becomes a source of your similarity when you submit your paper to a credible journal. I think it's better always to avoid such a possibility. Instead of relying online, whether it's free or a paid version, it's better to write or rewrite. Of course, it's time consuming, but it's better to write things on your own. Then about summarizing. Summarizing involves putting the main ideas of one, maybe you don't have the luxury of reading a 20-page article and understand what that paper is. You have to summarize it for the sake of what you've learned gets summarized. Significantly shorter than the original, but the core ethos of that paper, the sum and substance of their paper is kind of summarized in. Again, when you want to establish the background, or when you have to create a context of what your research is, or the relevance of the paper is, or describe a knowledge or a theory, when you want to determine the main ideas of a single source, or when you want to emphasize this is from where I got this idea, when you have to summarize a larger context and take one aspect and highlight it, I think all of that circumstances, it compels a researcher to summarize. So I spoke about three things: quoting, paraphrasing, and summarizing, and the different context in which you need to use it, and how judiciously one needs to use to avoid plagiarism. So I'm just before I wind up, I'm just giving you a kind of ready reckoner, or rather a sort of an anti-plagiarism checklist to ensure that the plagiarism is minimized. Simply be honest right from day one. You start reading a paper, you start referencing, you start writing your research planner, you start writing. Simply be honest, and be honest to yourself is the first thing. Second, understand what plagiarism is, what all comes under the definition of plagiarism, because as I said, it is different in different universities. It varies to different contexts. So please do go back to your university, go back to the journal, go back to the editors of the journal, and identify, understand to what limit, or to how much is permitted and what is considered plagiarism and what is not. And third is read carefully the guidelines for writing the thesis, familiarize with the subject or the elective. I think those are not that important. Learn how to cite. I think that's extremely important. Citation style, learning how to cite, what to quote and what not to quote, how to summarize, and understand what doesn't need to be cited. I spoke about common knowledge. Yeah, put your research in open access for more visibility, because if your research paper is open access, it brings in more transparency in building a research culture. It brings in a little more credibility to your work, because you are confident that your paper can be read and nobody will point fingers at you as if you have lifted your paper. These are some of the kind of ways in which. So some of the discussion point is about what is plagiarism, types of plagiarism. Is plagiarism a bad thing? I think you have answers for all this. What happens to plagiarists, how to avoid plagiarism, and how to trace plagiarism. So I would need only with the permission of the organizers and the participants, if I get another 10 minutes, I can wind up the session with a little bit of more of engagement with the participants, because this is important. How do we trace plagiarism? Because here I'll give actual context, circumstances, and then you'll quickly respond whether it is plagiarized work or it is not. Can I go ahead with this? Can I take
Sure, sir.
All right. Thank you. So this again, all due credit to Turnitin. I have referred to some of their presentations, and in fact attended to on how to identify plagiarism. So there are 15 such contexts which I'll be giving you, and you'll have to, here is a source text. This actually would take time, but then still. And here is what your student had submitted. The source text says there is no incongruity in the idea that in the very earliest period of man's habitation of this world, he made a friend and a companion of some, highly philosophical about. Now, what is it that the student had submitted here? Student had submitted there is no difference in the idea that in the very earliest period of man's habituation, if you go for a Turnitin similarity text, this is what it shows. Whatever I've highlighted, majority of the idea of which this report is generated are similar. Is it plagiarism? I think the answer is a giveaway. It indeed is plagiarism, because it copies majority of the source text while only attempting to modify a few keywords. Only few keywords are changed. It's a classic case of plagiarism. Yeah, the first case. Now, the second case, when you get a thesis, when you get a paper, is where you have a source text, or probably this. When you generate a Turnitin report, you get both. Yeah, you get access to the source text as also what the research scholar has written. Now, here the student work is this. The origin of different types of dogs can be perplexing question, as Leighton asks in Dogs and All About Them. Had all these dogs a common origin in a definite parent stock, or did they spring from separate and unrelated parents? Of course, these are not related to our discipline, but then I've lifted, I must say, but I've given credit at the bottom from where I've taken the Turnitin 2020 sources from where. What is similar here? Only one statement is lifted as it is, and it is also given, mentioned in quotation. It is given due, the author is also given credit. So it is a case of not being a plagiarized work. It is not plagiarism, right? Because the student's own writing to introduce a quoted piece of material from the text includes proper in-text citation. There is an in-text citation, Leighton, 1910, everything is done, and the section is included, and the sentence, if the writer has, or the research scholar has lifted, is in quotation. So therefore, it is not a plagiarized work. It doesn't come under plagiarism. Now, the third case is when you have a source text and the student work, and what if the similarity is this? Is only this much. Whatever is highlighted is what the similarity is. The explanation is that this example effectively paraphrases information. Paraphrasing is about rewriting, completely reconstructing the original source of, or you rewording the information in a meaningful manner, right? So here the citation is still included to acknowledge the ideas. You get to see the name of the author. You get to see the year in which it is published, the page number, everything is mentioned. So the citation is included, the author is acknowledged, the words, rather than the words themselves, though it comes from a different source. So it's a case of not plagiarized work. Yeah. So similarly, here in the fourth example, where the entire concept is plagiarized, only certain rearrangement of word has happened. No quotation, there is no citation. Yeah, so it's a classic case of plagiarism. Now, in the fifth example, you have a source text, and here the author has attempted to reword enough of the source text to appear as if it is written authentically, when the entirety, the idea is from the source text. There's no citation included. Yeah, there's no acknowledgement to the author. So it's again a case of plagiarized work. Now, another case is where you've given This example attempts to reword the the sentence to appear as if it is written authentically. In fact, the entirety of the ideas and some of the words are pulled directly from the source. There's no citation included, with the text to acknowledge that any of it comes from a different original source. So, as and when you read and understand the similarity reports, or sorry, the plagiarism check reports, I think some of the points, whatever we have discussed, would help you understand and interpret what is plagiarized work and what is not. Right now, I'll give a couple of more of context, which would, I think, solidify the idea of plagiarism. Number one is you are a member of an audience where the research results are presented. You use ideas described by one of the speaker in the design of your next research project. Yeah, so you were a part of a presentation and you got inspired by it, and you are designing it, another paper out of it. Now, if the idea is a common knowledge, I mean, what are the factors which should influence in deciding whether it's plagiarism or not? What if the idea is a common knowledge? You can certainly bank on it. But what if the lecture has a written format also being circulated as a handout or as a publication? I mean, you have to then give credit to the author, even if it is only verbally presented to an audience, before an audience. If it is, if there is a handout for an audience, or if it gets published somewhere, I think it has to be, because I've come across articles of speeches being quoted without giving credit to the speech or the person who had spoken. Now, another is context is you're reading a journal article, chapter, or a book. You paraphrase passages of text from the material you've been reading in the literature review of a manuscript you're writing. There are a lot of factors which influence, the quotation symbols, are you reference citation, so many factors. So I think I'll skip quite a few, otherwise I don't think I'll be able to do justice in taking questions. But then I would say there are a lot of online platforms or software plagiarism checking. I would subscribe, or see, this is not propaganda, this is not advertising, but then majority of people have been using Turnitin, and I would subscribe serious researchers to use Turnitin. And these days, I don't know, for some strange reason, we've gone, in our university, we've shifted to Urkund. Urkund is also another extremely commonly used and is considered more credible a source. So though there are multiple, dupli checker, plagiarism, so many other, but then I would suggest you to go with Turnitin and Urkund to find the plagiarism report, or to generate plagiarism report and identify the sources from where the research scholar, or probably to assess your own work to find plagiarism. So I'll just take another 2 minutes and then wind up. All what we were talking right from beginning was about how to avoid academic misconduct. It happens in different forms. It could be fabrication, making up data, or recording results and recording and reporting them. It could be falsification of data. Sometimes students do online survey and they make their own friends and relatives fill the research, such documents, manipulating research materials, or changing or sometimes even omitting data which might impact or influence your research outcome. Could also be that's about falsification. Another one is plagiarism. I think we spend about 2 hours 10 minutes to speak about what plagiarism is. So many things we have discussed, but then one bonus slide which I would some people certainly do have this habit of breaking the rules. Some people do it out of competition, or probably to survive the cutthroat competition. They wanted to go ahead and get along, and sometimes they find excuse, my boss is doing it, therefore it means it's not legal. Yeah, or some of them think the rules are made to be broken. So, but these are things, these are kind of mind games which people play around and justify the or give a rationality to the plagiarized work that they submit. But then I'll just wind up with one little kind of a story, or rather in African, the farming community in Africa, the monkeys used to come and damage all the crops, and they found a way out. What they do is they make a trap. The trappers, they make a hole in a coconut and fill it with nuts, and these monkeys would come and put their hand in this coconut, and out of the greed of and what happens is their hands get stuck, because they would never leave those nuts which are there in their hand, in the fist. So they get stuck there, over there. The hands get stuck, and then the farmers would easily get rid of these monkeys. They would either catch them or find some way out. So what I'm trying to say is, out of greed of not living or not leaving the opportunities that we have today with the online platforms and so many other things, are we stuck in any such monkey trap which compels us to do plagiarism in our research? If you are doing it, I think that's an injustice that we are doing to the profession as much as we are doing to research. Because Albert Einstein, I mean, this is the last, probably the second last slide I'm using. I'm just using a credible source to bring in a little more credibility to what we've been discussing. Most people say that it is intellect which makes a great scientist. It's wrong, it is character. And that is true with the profession of teaching or being an academician. It's important to build a good research culture, a credible research culture which is devoid of plagiarism. It's important to be a good academic citizen. It is important to know what we are doing. It is important to keep a track of what you've done, because it helps us to cross-verify if in case later on we discover that your work is plagiarized or probably has similarity with an existing work. And you need to keep a backup of everything, from whatever source. I think I've mentioned about the research document to be maintained. Not to lie, not to fabricate, not to falsify, not to plagiarize, and publish your discoveries, because that brings about a lot of transparency in the research work. That limits other people copying your authentic ideas. It's about, the last point, which was also mentioned by University Grants Commission. It is important that every institute develop a plagiarism prevention guidelines, both for the students as also for the educators, both for the research scholars as also for the teachers, as to what is permitted and what is not. So many institutions, premier institutions certainly do, but there are institutions which lack in this. Probably the ideas that you've got, not just today, probably the past 4 to 5 days you've been attending, whatever ideas that you've got, I would urge you to go back and initiate or probably engage more with. And I'll just quickly repeat, this is what the agenda was: define what plagiarism is plagiarism a bad thing? What happens to plagiarism? Can you spot plagiarism? I think I should have spent a little more time there, but because of paucity of time, I couldn't. And how can it be avoided? It's primarily about how we cite, how we quote, how we summarize is what can avoid. Or to cut a long story short, give credit where the credit is due. That's how you can avoid plagiarism. Because if at all I can summarize what this 2 hours of discussion is, it is an urge to be original. It is an urge to be genuine in what we are doing. That's all. That's my references or whatever sources I have taken. Maybe there's a concept called cognitive dissonance in marketing. You might have learned your expectation was different, but my delivery was sometimes something different, or you expected something else. So there might be a mismatch or sometimes what you expected. Some of you might be overwhelmed, some of you may not be, but then that's what cognitive dissonance is. And I follow this cognitive dissonance principle in all my classes, because I get inspired from Uni Krishnan sir, who's I also consider as a great mentor at Indian Institute of Management, where I was working in the research department. He used to say, in every lecture, you create cognitive dissonance. You create dissatisfaction, because if you teach everything, this stops the learning. If you create confusion and kind of leave a bit of a scope for people to go back and do research, the learning would continue. I hope I have succeeded in creating a little bit of cognitive dissonance. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to take a few questions, or else I'm leaving my contact here, and we can have extended conversations, one-on-one conversations, probably over an email, over a phone call, or over whichever medium that you feel is relevant for us to stay connected. On that note, I would take a pause, and I'm not saying I'll be able to answer all your questions. Sometimes a half-baked answer, sometimes a lead, sometimes whatever ways in which I can respond to. Open for questions, open for, over to you, ma'am. I stop here.
Participants, you can raise your questions now. It's time for discussion. I think we have one query in the
Hello,
chat.
good evening, sir.
Yes, good evening.
Hello, good evening, sir.
Good evening, good evening.
Sir, I have a question. If I write an article and it put on Grammarly or a write-up, so then it will get plagiarism or not?
Can you come again? Then it will?
They get plagiarism or not?
There is a possibility. Why? Because what if the Grammarly has not removed the content which you've checked in Grammarly? I mean, you have to make a request to remove the database which you have shared with them. Otherwise, it happened to me once. I had done a similarity check not in Grammarly, but one of the software which we were using, and then without deleting the report, I had sent a paper to a journal, and they found almost 90% similarity, and the similarity is my own paper, and they thought it was self-plagiarism, but then actually it was that I had forgotten to make a request to delete the earlier plagiarism report which was generated. So it is always, I'm not capable of advising. I would suggest not to go with online repository. If at all you're trying, make a request asking them to remove your data from their database, or else there is a possibility of a double or let's say increased plagiarism.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
And one suggestion is, again, it might be easier for us to check in online free resources. It is free, it is easily accessible, but there is a catch there. There is a possibility of your data remaining there. They are not accountable for you because you're doing it absolutely free of cost, even in paid versions. That's why I would suggest, you can ask your research guy to do a plagiarism check, or probably your university, and then after you get the report, after the report gets generated, make a request to them to remove what the material that you shared with them, or else there is a possibility.
Okay, sir. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any more doubts?
Sir, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Sir, when you said that copying one's own work is also plagiarism, so for instance that you have submitted your PhD thesis and thereafter you want to publish your paper. So this is like, I'm not saying that exact chapter should be taken out, but if there is something which I want to publish out of my thesis work, that is also considered now as plagiarism.
Yes, to a large extent. It wasn't until recently, because a lot of academicians, again, I'm not mentioning names, whom I know or whom I have worked with, they used to do this, because you are using your own data, you are using your own research content, and of course the credibility of it is also not a question mark there. But then with the revised UGC guidelines, which I think I did mention during the discussion, they've reduced the limit, and I think beyond the point you can't publish your own work, because once your work is published and you've got the credit for it, why should you republish your own work, your own, I mean, even if you're doing it.
No, sir, I'm not saying that it has been published, but my thesis has been submitted.
All right,
So I haven't published that work as yet, but the thesis has been submitted. I've been awarded the degree, but I want to, out of my research, my thesis work, I want to publish something. Will that be considered as plagiarism?
There is a limit to self-plagiarism. That's what I'm saying. Probably you can, if my memory is correct, you can check UGC website. 20th of April in 2020, they had come up with a circular. They've given it in detail. To what extent is it permitted? How many times can you, rework on your own research idea? Those things, guidelines, they have given in detail.
Okay, sir. Thank you. I'll check that.
Well,
But sir, there is a rule. You have to publish two papers from your PhD work or MPhil work. This is the rule. You have to publish from your thesis.
yes, I do completely agree with that. But then my point is, you've published paper, but then even after getting a PhD awarded, there are people who make papers out of your thesis work. I mean, someone had approached me after my MPhil work and asked for my data, because he said he'll help me out in culling out 2 other papers from the same paper which I've already published. I mean, that is not what is permitted, is what my point is.
Okay.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
May I get your email ID if you don't mind?
Yeah, it's there. I'm sharing my screen. You can jot it down from the screen.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Welcome. So I actually missed half of the meeting which I was supposed to attend. So if there are any questions, it's better that we wrap up. I'll be more than happy to stay connected with you. As I said, both my phone numbers, my landline, personal email ID is also my professional is shared. You can stay in touch with me. The social media platforms are also shared. Yeah, let's stay connected. If you find meaning and worth in this conversation, I'd be more than happy to stay connected with all of you. So thank you very much once again for this wonderful opportunity. I hope all of you are staying safe and also staying sane. Both are equally important. Your emotional is also your mental health and physical health. And thank once again the Department of Commerce, Ninikala ma'am, Shuji ma'am, and so many other people who have made this event possible. Thank the Department of Education, the Ministry of Education, who have made this platform, created this platform for all of us to interact. Yeah, let's stay connected. Thank you very much.
And now let me invite Dr. Elsa, Assistant Professor from St. Peter College, Copenhagen, to express the gratitude.
Thank you, Ninikala ma'am. Am I audible to you?
Yeah, ma'am. Continue.
First of all, I am not doctor. I am doing my research only.
Okay.
I am very happy to be a part of this training program. Thank you, Providence Women's College, for providing me such an opportunity. All the sessions are very informative, well organized, and opened doors to new opportunities of research. And coming to this session, sir, it's very informative, value-oriented, and systematically presented. And it was such a long session in this series. So I respect your sincere effort in taking this class. On behalf of Providence Women's College and all the participants, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to our honorable speaker, Rishikesh sir, for enriching us with your knowledge and expertise. A special thanks to Ninikala ma'am and her team for organizing this. Once again, thank you to you all.
Thank you. I'm so sorry that a lot of things which I had in mind, I couldn't because of the paucity of time. I could have planned it a little more better so that we could have had a little more one-on-one interactions. But let's say if on some other occasion we'll make it possible. Thank you. I'll leave the meeting now. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Dear participant, please don't forget to fill the feedback form. And thank you all. Have a great evening as well as a weekend. We'll have the next session on Monday. Thank you all.